Slow and shaped it for that with Monarch here on Kiwi. Its time now is 19 minutes past 9. The best ideas are free on a Monday morning with Ben Young at bwaggy.com, bwaggy.com, joining us from Young and Shant in downtown Auckland today. Hey there, Ben.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning. Now, last week we were talking about your trip to Japan recently, but also you went on a wee excursion to China and had a few experiences there. So let's talk about lessons learned in China.
Yeah. So after, I think, about 10, 11, maybe 12 days in Japan, we headed over to China for a bit. I just flew into Beijing. It was quite interesting. We flew in via a place called Dalian, and they're still constructing the airport. And, and instead of checking us through customs, because they're still building stuff, they just waved us through.
Yeah. Really? Gosh, that's loose.
You still had to fill out the forms, but they didn't do x-rays or any of that kind of stuff. Interesting.
That's the way it should be.
Yeah. It was quite interesting. We flew from there into Beijing, and a colleague of mine from university, who is of Chinese descent, has just gone back and had to start a business there.
Yeah.
And so he was able to give me kind of like the inside track on how things were. And it's quite interesting because in China, it's kind of a capitalistic regime inside a communist regime. Like there's real interesting tensions. And it's quite interesting because there's so much US dollars flowing into China that there's this like just explosive growth. I think it's 8% per quarter. So that's kind of like 2.5 times our annual growth happening every quarter in China.
It's interesting you say lots of American dollars flowing in, but ultimately it's lots of Chinese money flowing out, right, to prop up the American economy. That's where all the borrowing is coming from. That's where the world's money is coming. It's all coming from China.
Yeah, definitely at the moment. But they've kind of had that 10, 20 years of getting all these electronics made in China and fabrics and just about everything. Yeah. And all that money flows in.
Yeah, that's true.
And it hasn't traditionally come back out.
Yeah.
And also, the Chinese government has big subsidies because they're really trying to spur on growth for a lot of commodities. So fuel, steel, for etc., are heavily subsidised to help fuel that growth.
Yeah.
But it's quite interesting. My friend was saying that they've had such explosive growth, and 8% per quarter is nuts, really, that the government has had trouble keeping up with it. And just like when we're going through Beijing, there were motorways which weren't even on the map.
Gosh. Yeah.
So it was quite interesting. And the other interesting thing is to set up business in China, you have to set up a joint venture with a local partner. But there are a few Chinese companies which are traded on the NASDAQ, and what they do is there's a company sitting outside China which owns the exclusive license to the IP and revenue of the Chinese company, and that's what you're trading shares in.
Wow.
So there's tons of...
So people have got to find ways around the rules and regulations, but work within the framework.
Yeah. But that's the thing, the framework's still growing, and it's still fairly loose. That's just one way, and apparently evading tax is massive over there. But because they've got they still control the supply of money in and out. Essentially, kind of what they've got is they've got just it's like a big sandbox, and lots of money goes in and it moves around. Yeah. But because they control what goes in and out, they kind of don't need to worry about the details.
Yeah, interesting.
Well, that seems to be their perception.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is, in Beijing, New Zealand is advertised everywhere.
Is it?
It's on the planes. I saw some billboards. It's on the subway. So there's a couple of Chinese airlines which have started flying in direct to Queenstown. So they're all promoting New Zealand. So when you told someone you're from New Zealand, everyone instantly knew. It's quite interesting.
Yeah. So is it based around the 100% pure campaign, or could you tell?
No, it wasn't a 100% pure campaign. I think it's a few of the local tourism operators just trying to sell New Zealand, really.
Okay, right.
But high brand recognition, and I saw New Zealand more than any other place. It's quite interesting. On the flip side, I didn't see many Kiwi products. So I think there's still like massive opportunity there to get more Kiwi products into the Chinese market, and because they have it depends on the demographic you're talking to, but there's a bit of nostalgia there about New Zealand.
Nostalgia in what sense?
Well, in terms of travelling here or having relatives over here, or have had ancestors travel over here.
Okay.
Because of course. During the gold rushes, there were a lot of Chinese immigrants too. So the Chinese have been coming here for, a couple of hundred years, just as long as Europeans have. So
yeah, we hear a lot about China as being one of the big polluters, but also leading the world in green tech. Any evidence of that from your short stay there?
No, not really. There's definitely evidence of pollution. Didn't see anything of green tech.
Yeah.
But some of the interesting things is in developing countries, technology, because there's a massive catch-up effect, it's often one company which pushes 5 or 6 technologies. For example, Twitter's taken off quite big there. There's Taobao, which is the equivalent of eBay. There's the equivalent of YouTube, and there's a few social gaming networks. Like, instead of just one thing happening at a burst, there's just 5 or 6 innovations all happening at once.
Yeah. Okay. So, what would be your takeaway message for New Zealand companies, though, wanting to do business there or export to China?
Yeah, definitely. Number one, get a joint venture with a partner on the ground.
Yeah.
Do your due diligence. Like, really, really try and find a good partner. Because, the reality is, you are going into a new territory. People behave very, very differently. It's a different culture. The signs to you which signal success may not necessarily be the same there. So it's really important to get a good on-the-ground partner. A few good opportunities, kind of the same with Japan, is to find Chinese people that have lived in New Zealand or maybe studied here, because then they'll understand you as much as you can understand them. So you get a bit more of a middle ground. And the other thing is, I think, just work with it. Understand there is certain constraints in China, but they are changing. They're getting better at dealing with international companies, so just kind of roll with it. And the other thing is there's a massive adoption of Western tastes. Like Porsche have said, for example, the iconic Porsche in China is the Cayenne, which is, of course, their new SUV.
Yeah.
In the rest of the world, it's the 911.
Right.
So there's a great opportunity for brands to reinvent themselves in that market.
Huh. Excellent. Some great tips there for New Zealand business. Ben Young, people can go and see you, of course, online, waggy.com, bwagy.com, also on Twitter as well. Thanks very much, Ben. We'll see you next week.
Cheers.
And it's